Okay, we are recording.
Okay, I'll let everybody in then.
Yeah. Mhm. 46 people.
Wow, I'm surprised.
It's just now 6:02.
Some are just still joining us. Okay, I don't see anybody else. So we can
No,
go.
it's 2 after the hour, so
Okay. All right. So welcome Hammond North. It's May 13th at noon. Apologies for the timing of this meeting, but we had difficulty making sure and arranging that everybody could join. So we'd have a quorum so we could have a meeting. So first of all, the roll call. So Randy Vaughn,
here.
Gil Patton,
Here.
Ben Welch,
Here.
Chris Conti,
Here.
Tim Fritz,
Here.
and Tracy is muted. And let me see if.
No, yeah, can you get her?
Here.
There she
Okay.
is.
Okay, so Tracy's there too. Okay, so we have all 7 members of the board. So let me first announce, as we've said in announcements, that we've disabled chat, but we'll take questions from the owners. We had said earlier that we've canceled the May 20th meeting, and we have difficulty getting a quorum on the 27th. So the meeting will be on May 28th, will be the regular monthly meeting for the month of May. With that, can I ask Gil, do you want to summarize where we are with the negotiations on the PSA with Mike Stacy?
We met with our attorney Monday, and to go over a couple of points as far as the timing of the partition process. It looked like the partition process could move quickly, so that it might require us to make a decision whether to go the partition route or the sales route while we were still in the PSA process. So we were trying to find out if could delay the partition should the PSA still be moving forward. So we're waiting for that, and hopefully we'll have an announcement about that here in just a minute. John, have we heard from Chris?
I haven't heard anything back from Chris Finney.
Yep.
No, I haven't heard anything yet.
Yeah, that's critical information we need. Once we do that, once we have that understanding, then we'll be able to know how we can proceed with the PSA and get it back to Mike and move this thing down the road. Anybody else want to throw in there?
And we met with Chris on Monday, and he is going to what?
He was checking with the judge, the court,
Okay.
to see if it could be delayed, if need be.
Did he give a
Didn't
time
wanna-
frame of when he's going to get back?
Thought he would be back by now.
Okay.
Anybody else on the board? Any questions from the owners? Randy, can we unmute 77334?
MF 77334. You are able now. There you go. Okay.
Thanks. This is Michelle.
Oh.
Are you saying that you are asking about delaying the partition action? Did I hear that correctly?
That is correct,
Why would we delay the partition action?
because we may be in the middle of a sale.
But I just want to point out that we've been in the middle of two previous sales that have both fallen through for a variety of reasons. The partition action should not be delayed under any circumstances. We need to get out of this. We still have people who have not signed the consent to sell, and we still have people who are suing. And so why are we continuing to chase after a PSA? I don't understand. Whatever gets us out of this mess sooner is the best route, in my opinion.
Could be the PLC.
I mean, I don't understand. Can this board explain to me what the rationale for this is? This makes no sense to me. Thank
The
you.
rationale, go ahead, Randy.
The PSA, if we can get this to go through, would yield quite a bit more money for all of us than would the partition. Roughly, well, this is what we need. Our lawyers, we're waiting on them. Chris Finney is meeting with the judge. We're trying to get a handle on when will the partition come up and when will the judge say, okay, we're going to sell the building on this date. When we have that information, then we can know a little better as to how to handle this PSA. The PSA and the partition look like they're both kind of coming to a head at about the same time, a few months down the road. If the judge says, okay, we're going to sell this building next week, if the PSA is still going, what do we tell the judge? That's our dilemma. And we can't just leave the PSA. It's a contract. If we have signed the contract and it's still in effect, we can't just break the contract and go tell the judge, okay, sell the building. So this is our dilemma right now. So the question is, if the PSA is moving well, and it looks like, and if it looks like we're very close to an actual close on that for $12 million. This is what the delay would be. It would be to ask the judge, okay, let's not sell it next week. Could we sell it in 3 weeks and see if this PSA comes to close? And that's what the delay would be. It's not like we would want to delay it months and months and months. We're talking weeks, I would think, as we can see it right now.
Can I call on?
The question becomes, if we have to tell the judge, okay, judge, we are under contract to sell the building. And he has said, okay, we're going to sell it on this particular date. We have to say, well, we can't do it because we're under contract. We don't know what the judge will say. He may be nice about it and say, okay, we'll delay 3 or 4 weeks or whatever. Or he may say, well, if you can't sell it, we're going to dismiss the partition action. And if we dismiss the partition action, and then all of a sudden the sale falls through, we have to start the whole partition action over again, which is money and months, years. So that's our dilemma right now.
Can I call on Jan next?
So it's not like we're going to do this. We're just trying to find out what all the options are in case we need them. Because,
Yes.
because the judge, the relationship with the judge is critical, and Chris Finney is working on that. And it's not this partition action, as you've seen, is not a precise science. We don't want to do that, but we want to get the building sold. And in a few more months, we'll know a lot more than we do now. And I know we've been saying that forever, and it's still the case. But we're not going to blow an opportunity to sell the building.
Marion,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we see you, Sally. You're next.
If I were in a decision-making position, I need more specifics. Where are you seeing an overlap? How do you have a date for the judge's hearing? Number one. It seems to me that this PSA is taking longer to sign than the other two. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's a critical question. What kind of timing would be involved in the direct sale? And last but not least, which I'm almost forgetting now. Oh, could you not sign a PSA that says with a exception that should a hearing come up for petition, we have the right to withdraw our consent? Please answer some of those, if not all of those. Thank you.
Jan?
We are looking at exactly those questions. There are a bunch of variables at every step in the way, too many to go through in here, and they could turn out any which way. But so in June, this summation is due to the judge, the written summation, and that could take a couple of months, maybe up until September, and that could go either way. There's a trial date of September 28th and a pretrial conference of September 10th. And there are a number of variables related to each of those dates. And then there's, at the same time on the other track, there's the PSA going. And, there's a due diligence date. We hope we're close to signing that and to addressing some of those exact variables that you mentioned, Marion.
Anybody else on the board want to answer? Tim?
Marion, the other question that you asked is, could we put a clause in there that says if the partition action proceeds forward, the PSA is called off? Unfortunately, that's a bad deal for the potential buyer. He will be spending a ton of time and money all along the way in order to try to get the building sale closed. And for us to tell him that at any time we can break the contract is something that he would be unwilling to sign up for.
Anybody else on the board want to reply? I would just add that I think, Barry, those are very good questions. Those are exactly what we're grappling with. And we have the two timetables, the timetable in the PSA, the timetable in petition, and basically looking for the best possible outcome for all the owners. That's our aim.
I guess that's the other thing, is that what everybody has to realize is that there is a timetable associated with the PSA to go through due diligence, to go through some other legal work, to go through the closing. And that's what our problem is right now, is that timetable associated with the PSA now is clashing with the potential timetable of the partition action. And we're just trying to make sure that we keep the judge aware of what's going on, and we know what kind of options we have at the various points. Like Jan said, there's a summary action that's due in June, and there is a court date at the end of September in order to make the next decision on the partition action, how it goes forward. And we're just trying to and those timetables are overlapping with the PSA timetable. So we're just trying to make sure that we don't get to a situation where the judge says, okay, you guys aren't ready to act, so I'm going to throw the partition action out. That's what we're trying to protect against right now. Is we don't want a decision like that says, we're going to close you guys down because you're not ready to go. And we're on the verge of selling the building with a direct sale. So that's exactly the dilemma that we're in right now. And like Gil said, or Randy said, we're talking about a few weeks or a month or so. That we're dealing with right now. We're not saying we're going to stop the partition action for a long period of time.
I was going to wait till we discuss the appraisal value, but it seems to me it's integral to the whole question of if we go partition route, and that is being looked at again to raise the Collier's appraised value of 9.8 million. Tim or Gil, do you want to contribute to briefly summarize where we are with that?
Well, I went to Julie a couple of weeks ago and talked to her about the fact that Colliers just rolled over that appraisal value that they did in December of 24, and they were asked to do another appraisal, and as a result of some complex communications and some issues with the communications, we didn't give them enough information to update the appraisal. So we had Colliers out yesterday. Chris Finney made a call to Colliers. The Colliers appraiser came out to the building yesterday, and Gil and I explained to him and showed him the amount of work that was done on the building from January till whenever TRS and Hunt moved out, which I think was probably in April. There was quite a bit of work that was done in that period of time. And what we're doing right now is we showed him the work that was done. We showed him the materials that were purchased. Right now I am compiling the exact amount of money that we paid to TRS and Hunt in that time period, and the exact amount of work that was done based on the notes that we had from the construction meeting that every week we had a construction meeting with Hunt and TRS, and they updated us on the progress and what had been done that week. So I have to consolidate all that information for Colliers so that he can take a look at revising his appraisal. And he seemed agreeable to relook at the appraisal and update that appraisal so that we can get off of the 9.8 million.
Thanks, Tim. Randy?
Yeah, and just
And
real
then
quick, dovetailing on the end of what Tim said, even if no matter what appraisal we get, if this goes out to auction, we have to find a buyer who will pay that appraised amount, or if no one does, then it can go for auction at a lesser amount. So, we just because a judge says, okay, we're going to sell the building, that doesn't guarantee us the full appraised amount. We have to keep that in mind. So if we can get the PSA to go through, that's nice.
Gil, and then I should call Sandy. Sally.
Just go ahead with Sally. I'm good.
Sally, your question?
Well, first of all, thank you to the board for the work you've been doing. I understand your dilemma. However, I must second Michelle's concerns. What makes you feel optimistic that this sale is going to go through?
One second.
You have a lawsuit that's not going away, and you have a holdout in terms of signing the agreement to sell. Why in the world do you think that this sale is going to go through? You haven't even signed a contract, right? I don't understand why you think this sale is going to happen. Can you explain that to us?
We're very optimistic, Sally. We've moved along. Gil can probably talk to this better than I, but we have moved a long way in the PSA. We've gone from a place where we didn't know whether we could get a PSA to a point where we're very close.
You're on your third buyer. We still have a holdout on this agreement to sell, and it's not going to go away until the lawsuit goes away. What
we-
in the world makes you think that this is going to happen?
We need to pursue the opportunity to get $12 million out of the building as opposed to a partition agreement, which gets us 2/3 of the appraised value, which is going to be somewhere in the $7 to $8 million range. We need a little bit more time in order to try to work out this PSA so that we can maximize the value of the building. And we have to have the right language in the contract in order to be able to do that. And that's what we're working on right now is the last little bit of language. We've had several meetings with Mike Stacy. We've come a long way in the negotiation, and both sides are very optimistic about getting this closed out. But there's just a couple details, and this, unfortunately, this partition action timeline has come in because it's potentially proceeding a little bit faster than we thought it would.
Let me
Don't see
call
how
on,
that problem because you have a lawsuit and someone who's holding out. I don't get it.
Jan?
So when the ACM bid went south, we stopped working on the consent to sells. That chapter is not over. And there's potential there.
No, there is not.
The lawsuits, we can sell the building. Those have not been issues with any of the buyers or with the partition process as far as that goes. We have a method to reserve money. We don't know how much it would be yet, so that we can sell the building if the lawsuit is not settled.
Gil?
And Sally, I wanted to make the point that we're having these conversations about the partition now so that we know what we're dealing with when we get down the road.
Yeah.
So here we are in May, and if we sign an agreement, if we want to decide to go ahead and sign this agreement, somewhere down in October, we could be looking at the partition or the agreement, and we need to have a clear understanding of how we can approach that. Because if we with this PSA, we could be done by October. We could still be going on. The longest period of time for this right now is like mid-January. If we took all the time, the entire time that it allows. So we're trying to understand from the court, from our attorneys, where we stand in that. And that's why we're having those conversations now before we sign this PSA and put ourselves in a position where we're locked in. We're trying to be very proactive here.
Let me just add one point that on the last consent to sell form, which as Jan said, I think we have some ideas to resolve it. Unlike ACM's contract that wanted those 180 forms 15 days after we signed the contract, the current PSA, I think, is much more generous that we only have to provide all 180 forms at closing. So I think that there's more time and we're optimistic we can resolve that particular problem. With that, I think, Gil, your hand's up. You don't.
No.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So can we unmute Kate?
Thank you. Could you please tell me, or any other member of the board, when did the bidding process begin? Does anyone remember the date or the time, the month? When did this begin?
I'm sorry, Kate, when did which in particular begin?
The bidding for the sale of the building. When did you begin that?
I think the best answer, I believe what you're talking about, is the current PSA with Mike Stacy.
No, I'm talking the bidding process. There were multiple people. When did you begin that?
When did we sign on with Jordan? That was like.
Ask you when we first.
That was August.
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 Mhm.
August 25.
August 2025.
Okay. Thank you.
Can we unmute Mary?
I think one of my questions is probably that some other people want to know exactly what are the issues and the problems with the PSA with Mike Stacy. You keep referring to issues, nobody specific. Is like what you had two other contracts, you signed them almost immediately with two other companies. Mike Stacy was there originally with the 15 million. Then he got pushed aside when they hired Jordan and went on. He's back again. Still haven't signed a contract. Exactly what is the reason or the cause that you will not sign the contract with him? What are those impediments?
Not for open discussion.
Let me add, I can well imagine that if I was in the shoes of an owner not on the board and not privy to the executive session discussions with the PSA, with Mike Stacy, with Chris Finney, the lawyer, all the ins and outs of these overlapping, one, the PSA, and two, overlapping with the partition timeline, I'd be very frustrated. But I think the board understands, and I hope the owners do, that in the interest of resolving those differences and signing a PSA, it's best if we don't get into those particulars. Again, I'm sure it's very frustrating, but that's the road that we have chosen, not the public to discuss any of the board members' individual positions or Mike Stacy's position.
Is there any approximate timeline you can see for signing with Mike Stacy? Because, you know, it's over 3 years and it's going on. And I don't know if anybody on the board watches the economy or listens to the news and is aware of the things that are happening in terms of increases in healthcare, gasoline, cost of living. I mean, it's just really hurting the owners unless you are kind of independently wealthy. And that's where I think so much frustration is coming from, because the HOA that we keep paying is really difficult for people now, and we don't see any end to it.
Mary, we are completely and totally aware of all those things that you talked about. And suffice it to say that we have gone from a handful of issues with Mike Stacy down to a very few. We've made wonderful progress in eliminating most of the issues, but there are one or two tricky issues that are left. And unfortunately, the partition agreement or the partition action has now entered into that negotiation because of the potential timing of the partition action. And like Gil said, we're trying to make sure that we know what our options are as we go through the sales process and as we go through the partition action. And that's what we're trying to do. Chris Finney is talking to the judge, making the judge aware of what's going on so that we don't pull any surprises. That's the last thing we want to do, is pull a surprise on the judge so that he makes some kind of an arbitrary and capricious action that would hurt us. So that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to prepare everybody for what's going to go on towards the end of this year as we go through the closing process.
Okay, call on Chris. Newporty.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I have two questions that are related to this in a very general sense. One is, I'm on the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts website right now, and are we actually certain that we have a trial date? Because when you look at the case schedule for the partition action, there's multiple lines that say active and cancel. Like for the bench trial on September 28th, there's a line that says the status is canceled and one that says active. So are we actually certain that we have these dates and times set up? Because it's a little confusing to read on.
Based on our discussion with Chris and Julie, we have a firm date, and It's either the
September
28th or the
28th.
29th of September.
September 28th.
September 28th.
Okay, that like I said, it's just a little confusing because the very top line, like which would be the most recent, looks like it's been canceled, and that's why I wanted to verify if we still actually had that court date. But my other
Follow up
question,
on that. We can follow up on that.
okay,
And it
my other
may be, and Chris, it may be that from Chris Finney's discussion with the court yesterday that occurred, and we haven't been made aware of it yet. So will certainly be. I mean, I just reached out via email to them while we're sitting here. Hopefully, we'll get an answer quick.
okay.
Chris, before you get your second question, I believe that hearing is on certain motions and certain parties to the case, but that's not, I don't believe, a petition court date that settles the whole petition action. I think after that court date, the next step is appointing a commissioner. There's the appraisal that we talked about later. So the process will go a little bit longer than that.
Well, I mean, I assumed that. I just wasn't sure if we actually had that initial trial date because of the way things are like set up on this site. It's not the easiest to read sometimes, so that's why I was asking about that. And then the other question that I had is, and I'm just going to preface this that I'm not asking you in any shape or form to identify the person, but can someone speak to any sort of specific actions that, such as like, are you having weekly meetings with the one holdout to try and convince them to not do this holdout? Like, what are some actions that are being taken? You say you're optimistic, but we'd kind of like to know what the what actions you're actually taking to try and convince them to stop holding out, and what is being like what kind of conversations are you having with this like the one holdout, and that's the kind of
Hey,
specifics that we're looking for.
so you want me to address it, Jan, or you want to go ahead?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, we really can't discuss that.
You can't say you're talking to them every week. That's what I'm looking for. Is like,
Yeah.
These are confidential conversations, and we don't want to jeopardize anything. So I really don't want to say any more about it. Tracy, you can add what you want, but.
So Chris, there are confidential conversations, but we have made contact. We're optimistic that there would be a resolution. I don't foresee this holding up the sale of the building.
well, I'm not asking for the content of what you're talking about. I'm asking for the actual, like, what you're doing. Like, are you talking to them every week? That should be a simple question that you can answer. I don't want to know what you're talking about. I want to know that you're actually doing it and not just hoping for the best.
Chris, I'll tell you where we are.
Let me repeat that the conversations were much more active when we had a signed PSA and we had deadlines when we had to meet to get the 180 signatures on those forms. That deadline now is not set yet until we sign the PSA. And the other one, as I've mentioned earlier, is not till closing that we need to receive all the consent to sell forms and the quitclaim deeds. So, at this point, we're not having daily conversations, but I think that equally what people said, I think we're optimistic at that point. As soon as we sign a PSA, we'll begin those discussions again. Tim.
And just note,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Chris, that we will not.
Where we are.
Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Where we are is we have gotten to the point where we believe we know what we need to do to work out this situation. So weekly conversations right now aren't really meaningful because we're at a point where we think we know what we need to do in order to fix the situation. But Jan was having a lot of conversations. Tracy, I think, was having a lot of conversations up until the point that we got to this act to where we are right now.
And Chris, just know that we're not going to wait until like the 9th hour to resolve this. So.
All right, I see Michelle and Marion. Before I go back to you, there are any other owners of any other questions or board members on this conversation? Okay, Marion, sorry, Michelle, you're next up.
I greatly appreciate all the work everyone on this board has been doing. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes for anything. Having said that, I've heard so many qualifiers to what you're saying. We think, we're optimistic, we have hope, all these qualifiers. I've heard these qualifiers since September when we had our first PSA. I heard them again when we got our second PSA. I am fairly certain that the person holding out is not going to sign. And so my big concern right now is that regardless of what the opportunity is to sell the building, we need to sell the building as soon as we can. I want to echo what Mary said. The financial stress that all of us have been under, those of us displaced the night of the fire 3 years ago, those of us displaced from the first fire almost 5 years ago, we need a resolution to this. My big concern is that optimism and wishful thinking are a very, very thin line. I appreciate that you guys want to get the most money for us. I do. But a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. If we can sell this building through partition, yes, we'll make less, but we will get out of this and everybody in our community can move on. I hope this board, I'm very concerned about what Chris Nieporty said, that if this trial has been canceled for partition and moved out later, we have just lost a huge opportunity. I feel like Charlie Brown and Lucy Van Pelt kicking the ball. Everybody's ready to kick the ball again, and it's going to get pulled away at the last second. And that's what I think is going to happen because that's the pattern. So I ask this board to really reflect on, is it wishful thinking that you want to get the extra money for us? Or is it a real possibility? Because I don't believe it is a real possibility knowing what I know. So that's all I got. Thank you so much.
Marion?
Yes, it seems to me that we lost the previous offers after the due diligence. So there's always the possibility that this offer would fall away after due diligence. Why can't you sign a contract that says everything, the closing must be complete before September, before August 31st? Because they can drop out, but you're saying we couldn't drop out if we decided we had a chance for petition. So I guess I'm asking, we have 4 months between now and the court date, at least. Why can't you request that the sale go through and closed by then? And yes, I also agree that we realize you're working very hard and it's a no-win situation at this point. So I appreciate your efforts and hope you can answer my questions. Thank you.
Aaron, we have a negotiated timeline that we have worked out with Mike Stacy. And that negotiated timeline takes us into the area of when the partition process is going to move forward. So first, to answer Michelle's question, again, we are not indefinitely putting off the partition action. We're just trying to make sure that the partition action doesn't get in the way of the sale. And we have negotiated a timeline with Mike Stacy, and that timeline gets us into a situation where we overlap with the potential actions of the partition process. So that's what we're trying to work out right now. So that we have, like Gil said earlier, so that we know what our options are come end of the year, and that we don't trap ourselves in a contract or in a court action.
Randy, you had your hand up?
This is pretty much going to say, I think, what Tim did. You have to remember the PSA it's a contract. That means two different parties have to agree. We can And we have actually requested some of the things I think that are being suggested here. But both parties have to agree to that. So yeah, we can say, hey, we want this thing settled next week. But that, you know, we have to have the buyer agree to that as well. So remember, we're not dictating the terms of this. This has to be an agreement.
I see Michelle, so can you unmute Steve Kaufman? Who hasn't asked questions yet?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something as regards all of this. Is it not the case that under partition action, any owner has first right to make the offer?
That's correct.
Well, think about that and what is now going on with the delay in the purchase PSA. That's all I have to say.
We've thought about that.
Thank you. I know Michelle's hands up, but are any other owners have any other questions?
If we don't have anything else on the agenda, let's call on Michelle one more time, and then we have some of these issues to discuss in executive session. Oh,
Okay, Michelle has dropped her hand. If there are no other questions, I think that's Michelle, your hand is up again. That'll be the last question from the owners. Can we unmute Michelle?
I appreciate this conversation greatly. I am incredibly frustrated because we keep going back to PSA partition, PSA partition. We're not talking the lawsuit. We're not talking the holdout. We're not talking the known existing barriers that resulted in us losing the 2 previous contracts. I do not believe they are going away. I understand this board is optimistic and hopeful and wants them to go away. If I had a magic wand, my God, would I be spreading that thing around like crazy right now. But it is what it is. And partition right now, anything that puts the action that gets us out of this mess the quickest way is going to be really problematic. So I urge this board to do everything to move forward with the most likely successful course of action, and that is partition. Thank you.
Michelle, I got to
We're
throw one.
doing nothing to delay the partition, okay? So I don't see the problem.
But Randy, that's
One more.
unless you get into a quagmire, what you guys have said, and correct me if I'm wrong, unless you get into a quagmire where there's an overlap with the partition and the PSA. In that
And that-
case, I heard you say you're willing to try to convince the court to postpone the partition for possibly several months. My
No, I didn't
concern-
say that, Michelle.
That-
I
it's-
said a week or
You
2 or
didn't
3.
say that, but that's what I heard. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Is that not what
You're
you
wrong.
said? I'm
No.
wrong. So I didn't hear
I
you
said that I
guys
was
say you're willing
delirious.
to.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Cut her
I
off.
misunderstood.
Cut her
Thank you.
off. She's
Please,
done.
what? I'm sorry, Michelle, I muted you, but also board members, please, one at a time, raise your hand. Randy, did you have anything else you want to say on that?
No.
Tim?
What you have to realize here is that we are dealing with probability. What we're dealing with right now is the probability that the court action proceeds at its fastest possible pace. If the court action proceeds at its fastest possible pace, we're going to be conflicting with the timeline in the PSA. The other part of the problem, Michelle, that you have to realize, and why the partition action, we don't know what the timeline of the partition action is. And we can't tell what the timeline of the partition action is. All we can tell is that if nothing bad happens in the partition process, we could be at a decision-making process by the end of the year. The problem is that if anybody opposes the partition action in September, and that includes 180 owners and 40 or 50 mortgage companies, if any of those people oppose the partition action in September, it's 9 more months. So what we're dealing with is we're dealing with the possibility that the partition action cruises through without anybody of the 240 or 250 people that are involved in this thing opposing it. And we don't know what the likelihood of that is. But if we get into a partition process where we're going to sell the building for significantly less than what we have it listed for, more and more banks are going to get concerned. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the probabilities of how this thing is going to happen. And we're trying to prepare for all the probabilities and possibilities that might happen. And we did not say several months. We said we think that it'll be, I would say, probably a month or two. If we have to ask the court to delay the process, we're probably asking for a month or two.
So
Again,
I'd say, Gil, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and again, that's if everything goes as fast as it can without any kind of interruptions, which doesn't really seem practical, but we're covering ourselves to make sure that we know where we would stand if that would happen. At the same time, the PSA may go faster than what we've allowed it in the contract. No, the buyer has said they want to make it happen faster. We want it to happen faster. But again, there's variables out there that none of us can control. So we're just trying to be proactive in what we're doing here to understand how we can address this come September or October, where we'll know a whole lot more information on the buyer side and our side.
Tim?
One other thing I just want to address and maybe expand a little bit on what Gil just said. The timeline that is in the PSA is what we perceive to be the worst possible case.
Mm-hmm.
So we are hopeful that once we get into the actual sales process, we can accelerate some of those dates that are in the PSA. The timeline that's in the PSA right now is worst possible case, so that Mike has got himself protected the way he feels like he needs to be protected. So that's the other part of the problem is we're dealing with best case versus worst case in the partition, and we're dealing with worst case versus best case in the sales process.
Exactly.
Okay, with that, I would call on Mark, but I tried to unmute you and you didn't reply. Given you haven't answered any questions,
Try Mark one more time.
if you can't unmute yourself, I think
Can you unmute?
we've sent him messages.
Darn.
So I'm sorry, Mark, but we can't seem to
Mark,
unmute
can you
yourself.
unmute?
Okay,
All right.
it's okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's the agenda, I think, for today's meeting. We need to adjourn. Tim?
Motion to adjourn the executive session.
Motion to adjourn and a second from Gail. Okay, all those in favor?